If you've wondered what a future worth fighting for might hold for wild horses as we look to the new year, 2024, then this episode is for you. I'm your host, Carol Walker, and let's get started. Welcome to the Freedom for Wild Horses podcast, the place to find out about wild horses in the American West and what you can do to help them stay wild and free. If you love wildlife, wild horses, and the freedom that they stand for, this show is for you. I'm your host, Carol Walker. Let's get started. First, I'd like to wish all of you a happy, healthy, and peaceful new year. I think it's important to look ahead and plan for new ways to help our wild horses and to look for openings for positive change. It's easy to get bogged down into what's wrong and what doesn't work. Yet I'm asking you to suspend thinking about that for a little while as you listen and dream the dreams that will empower all of us to keep on working to make the world a better place for our wild horses. At the time the 1971 Wild Free Roaming Horse and Burro Act was passed, wild horses roamed on 49 million acres of our public lands. Today, they are in 177 herd management areas in 10 western states, and 22 million acres on which they were originally found has been taken away from the wild horses' use. There are currently over 60,000 wild horses housed in holding facilities. The very first thing that needs to be done is that these horses in holding facilities need to be returned to the 22 million acres where wild horses were originally found and be allowed to live out their lives free on our public lands where they belong. These will not be breeding populations because the stallions have been gelded. While preparing to return the horses to these herd areas, the holding facilities, even the private ones, need to allow public access at least once a month so that the public may view and see if the horses in holding are being cared for properly. At the time the act was passed, wild horses were supposed to be managed where they were found and were recognized as an integral component of the natural system, only to be removed if it's proven that they are overpopulating or causing habitat destruction. And the government can maintain specific ranges on public lands as sanctuaries for their protection and preservation. In these ranges, they are considered principal species and should be managed as such. This, I believe, is how we need to move forward. Our public lands in the United States are supposed to be managed as multiple use, and wild horses do and should continue to have a place on the lands in the 26.9 million acres where there are herd management areas. There needs to be herd management area plans for each of the 177 herds. These very important plans would include an analysis of resources, forage, wildlife, livestock, wild horses, would include continual monitoring, and would determine what the appropriate management level would be for wild horses rather than an arbitrary made-up number. Access to water and to grazing needs to be a priority for these areas, even if there is mining and drilling going on in there. Habitat needs to be protected, not destroyed, in areas where there are wild horses. Land swaps should be used to consolidate public lands in areas where there are checkerboards of private and public land. Genetic viability is an important factor in preserving wild horse populations. Originally, Gus Cothran, the leading geneticist on wild horses, had said there needs to be a breeding age population of at least 150 adult wild horses in each herd to ensure genetic viability. But newer studies contend that 278 wild horses in a herd should be the goal. Currently, over 70% of the 177 herds have an AML of less than 150, some as low as 40, 50, or 60 wild horses. So these numbers need to be adjusted upward immediately. Wild horses should be given all the protections of a native species. They are a returned native species. Recent findings have shown that the horse disappeared from North America even later than was originally thought, about 5,000 years ago. They were reintroduced by the Spanish in the 1500s and fit precisely into an ecological niche they used to occupy. They should be afforded all the protections our native species enjoy. Research needs to be conducted on all aspects of the lives of wild horses: behavior, seasonal migration, predators, the effect on the herds of drilling and mining on public lands, forage and the effects of livestock grazing on our public lands, the effects of harsh winters on the herds, the actual population increase and decrease numbers of each herd, to name a few. Members of the public should be allowed and encouraged to become partners in this research. Real counts of each herd should be done. Most of the smaller herds have records of each member, such as in McCullough Peaks and in Spring Creek, but for the larger herds, there can now be actual counts done using infrared technology. Every herd should be counted before any management planning is done. Population control measures should be used only when the herd is large enough and has genetic viability, and permanent sterilization measures such as gelding, vasectomies, chemical sterilization, gynecon, ovariectomy via colpotomy, and IUDs, none of these should ever be used on wild horses. Only the least invasive, safest, reversible, and most humane methods should be used. There should never be another helicopter roundup of wild horses. This cruelty and abuse needs to stop immediately. If there is a life-threatening emergency such as a fire and horses need to be moved, other methods of capture should be used, such as bait trapping. All planning for wild horse management needs to be conducted with public review and input at each stage, and public comments need to be listened to and used. There should be no need to file Freedom of Information Acts to get data and information about the management of wild horses, and the staff in charge should answer the public fully and completely. Information about each herd should be available online to the public. The very best outcome would be to take management of wild horses out of the hands of the Bureau of Land Management completely, and to have a separate, independent agency, not overshadowed by the livestock industry, managing the horses and advocating for them as an essential part of our Western public lands that all Americans have a right to. Wild horses should be able to live out their lives wild and free on our public lands, with their families, with access to forage and water, and with no fear of being harassed and removed from their homes. Wild horses are valuable in and of themselves. They inspire us, they remind us what it is to be a part of nature and the wild spaces that they inhabit. They deserve our respect and our protection and should remain a part of our nation for many years to come. Thank you for listening to this episode of Freedom for Wild Horses, and may 2024 be a year filled with good tidings for our wild horses. Thank you for listening to this episode of Freedom for Wild Horses. If you want to learn more, follow me at www.wildhoofbeats.com for more information and for ways to help America's wild horses. See you next time.